Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. My name's Daniel. This is my brother Clive.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, good episode coming up, Daniel. I think I've learned a lot this week. We talked a bit about how I'm not too up on the history of the church, but I've found it quite fascinating reading through it. The doctrine, obviously, very important. The history, the more you look into it, the more the story sort of comes together. And that's what I'm enjoying about it.
Clive, I'll start off with a quote, and then we'll get into it. I know we're doing Doctrine and Covenants 3 to 5 today. So if you're reading along with the scriptures, we're starting in Doctrine and Covenants chapter 3. So we're not looking at Joseph Smith history today like we have done in the last couple of weeks. So I will start with this quote. This is about Martin Harris. Lived for a long time. He lived till he was 92. And so he was interviewed a lot. I don't think as much as David Whitmer, but he was interviewed a lot about the visions that he had and his testimony of the gospel. And his testimonies were just outstanding. This is a guy here, his name's Thomas Godfrey. Thomas Godfrey remembered that Martin Harris insisted that knowledge supersedes belief because, and this is Martin Harris being quoted here, I saw the angel and saw the plates from which the Book of Mormon was translated and heard the voice of God declare it was translated correctly. A guy called Alma L. Jensen, present on the same occasion, gave an independent recollection of the same language, but remembered that additional detail that Martin Harris physically pointed to his eyes and ears while talking to emphasize the personal knowledge of his senses. Robert Avison, a lifelong printer, recalled the exact day on which he had a long interview with the 91-year-old man who walked in a stooping position. He asked directly about seeing the plates and the angel and received the clear reply. It is not a mere belief, but is a matter of knowledge. I saw the plates and the inscription thereon. I saw the angel, and he showed them unto me. Martin Harris, just an absolute legend. When he moved to Utah, in the end, he moved to Utah. And there's interviews of Brigham Young going and meeting with Martin Harris to talk to him and learn about the testament, the vision of the three witnesses, and Martin Harris talking to Brigham Young about what he's seen. And Martin Harris would just say, let's go. You take me somewhere and I'll declare of the Book of Mormon. You've just got to get me there and I'll do the work. And just a phenomenal missionary was Martin Harris.
Yeah, Martin Harris is great. And we're going to be talking about Martin Harris a lot this episode. I mean, that's what the chapters are about. We really like Martin Harris, as so everybody should, but we're just going to give you the facts really today. Don't take this off, anything as trying to badmouth anyone. This is the facts, but we think Martin Harris he was elect, he was chosen of God. So, that's the way it's always going to be.
We're starting with Doctrine and Covenants section 3. And this revelation comes after Martin Harris, in care of the Book of Lehi, in care of the 116-page manuscript, loses the manuscript. And I guess we'll talk about a couple of things, Clive, and then maybe we'll circle back and go through the story of exactly how that happened.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a couple of intense, maybe, verses here. This is a very public disciplinary counsel that Joseph Smith receives. And by very public, I mean we're reading about we're reading the words that the Lord sort of whacked Joseph Smith with. If there was a disciplinary council in church, you're not going to read that in a journal in 10 years, 100 years, ever. You're never going to read that. But here we are reading the words that were said to Joseph Smith. And there's a couple. Clive, this one here I thought I might throw to you and just get your perspective on. In verse 3, remember that it is not the work of God that is frustrated, but the work of men.
Yeah, well, so he's lost the pages of the Book of Lehi, which contained a lot of writings. This doesn't change God's plan. This has just made it more difficult for us that want to understand certain points of doctrine that might have been in there, that we don't get that now. So it hasn't frustrated God's plan. God's plan is still perfect. It's still going the way it should, but it's now frustrated the work of men to understand these, what would have been basic principles, because we would have found them with the Book of Mormon. And now it's difficult. And now we're finding these things that to us, we're like, oh my goodness, someone's just said this, or look what I found that might have been in the Book of Lehi. But it was such basic doctrine, like the Book of Mormon has in it, that it's like it's extra work. It's more steps to get to these doctrinal pieces that we would have just known. And I guess that's what the
Right.
Lord's really saying there. It didn't change my plan. It's just made it harder for you.
That's interesting. Then he goes on in number 4. For although a man may have many revelations and have power to do many mighty works, yet if he boasts in his own strength and sets at naught the counsels of God and follows after the dictates of his own will and carnal desires, he must fall and incur the vengeance of a just God upon him. A lot to take out there. Although a man may have many revelations and have power to do mighty works, Joseph Smith, although you, Joseph, a man that can have revelations and can have the power, yet if you boast in your own strength and set at naught the counsels of God, so we'll learn about this more in a moment, but Martin Harris hits up Joseph multiple times to take the Book of Lehi, and so he can show his wife. And Joseph lets him take it in the end and almost takes the situation in control himself, trusts Martin and takes it away. And he sets the counsels of God to naught because the Lord says to him twice, he's not taking it. It's just not happening. So he sets God's counsel at naught. And that's what that reference is. He follows after his own dictates. And then this is really extreme, and carnal desires. Really, really extreme. And then the other one that's really extreme, Clive, I don't know if you want to come back to verse 5, but verse 6, and behold, how oft have you transgressed the commandments and the laws of God and have gone on in the persuasions of men? The angels go, the Lord is saying to him, how many times have you done this? Here we are again. How many times? And he says often. How oft have you transgressed the commandments and the laws of God? Like I was saying, this is a very public counsel to Joseph. By the way, and this is a Joseph Smith who first child has just died, not long after Martin takes the 116 pages.
The book was taken on the 14th of June. The baby was born and died on the 15th of June. So it's a difficult time for Joseph as well as everything else on top of it.
From my understanding of the timeline, it's about 1 month later. It's 3 weeks to 1 month later that this happens. So this is just super, super fresh. And it's a very challenging time for Joseph to be receiving such counsel. And for it to end up, he agreed for it to go into the book of Revelations, the book of commandments, sorry. He agrees. It was section 2. He's very open about this and is aware that people are reading these things.
But it's, I mean,
a year later.
It's off.
3 years later.
It's for our learning, isn't it? It's to go,
right.
Don't question the Lord. You know, my daughter right now, she's learning how to roller skate. And she said to me, I don't need to wear padding. I'm not going to fall. I said, I know you don't plan on falling, but you might fall. No, I won't fall. I know you don't want to fall. And that's the same I see with Martin Harris. I'm not going to lose them. The Lord said, I know you don't want to lose them, but you could still lose them. No, I'm good. I'll take them. You know, I'll be fine. The Lord knows better, but because the constant, hey, I want them, you know, ask again. And the Lord's going, look, it's on you, but I'm telling you, you know, I've already said my bit.
Yeah. Remind your kids of the time I broke my arm rollerblading.
Well, my daughter did break her arm roller skating just a year ago.
Right.
So,
right.
You know, I know
0
better.
lessons learned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Should we get into the story of the lost pages? And let's come back. We're up to about verse 7 or verse 8, but it might make a bit more contextual sense if we go through that story.
Okay.
The Harrises, Lucy Harris and Martin Harris, were inquiring with Joseph Smith if Joseph Smith was telling the truth. Martin Harris interviews all the different people in Joseph's family and then corroborates their story together and agrees that the stories match. So therefore, okay, Joseph must be selling some kind of truth. Lucy Harris gives him $28 as a loan. She wants to see the gold plates. He doesn't let her. She wants to pay to see them. He doesn't let her. She ends up loaning him $28. Martin Harris hears that Joseph is going to be tar and feathered, tells him to get out of town, and gives them $50 to pay off his debts so that he can leave the town debt-free, which he does. Emma Smith leaves first, takes a weapon, and Joseph leaves a couple of days later. So that's the context behind this next part. So Martin is working with Joseph, and he's the scribe. He's Joseph's first scribe, and he asks to look at the plates, and he asks for he says he wants a further witness of their actual existence, and then he might be able to give a reason that he's given that money, or that he's given a reason as to why he's being a scribe. So he asks, and Joseph says, no, you can't see them. It's just not happening. And there's a little bit of a script here. Joseph says, they haven't gone anywhere, Martin. Martin says, you ask for my help, but you can't show them to me. Joseph says, no, I've been commanded not to. Martin says, they're either gold or lead. You don't have enough credit to purchase lead. Joseph says, Martin, the story's true, all of it. Martin says, you must not blame me for not taking your word. And Joseph says, if it hadn't happened to me, I don't think I could believe it myself. And this is a story I've told a couple of people in some lessons, by the way, that Joseph Smith, who's this person that we put on this really high pedestal, rightly so for the things that he's done, but we choose to believe him. We choose to believe his story. We choose to believe that the Book of Mormon is true. We choose to believe that the revelations came from God to Joseph Smith and to all the other prophets and presidents, right down to our current President Nelson. But Joseph Smith says to Martin Harris that he's not sure he could believe it either. And so I always tell people, how great is your faith if you can believe Joseph, and if you can believe the history of the church. So the 116 pages are now done. Martin asks again. Joseph says no. And then he says, can I take the manuscript home? And Clive, Joseph here, he prays, right? He prays and he gets a message of no, but there's a process of how that goes.
Well, I mean, I don't know the full extent of the details, but here in this book that I've got, it says, he went to the prophet's temporary home in Harmony and acted as scribe of him, manifesting great interest in the work. But when he had written 116 pages, he began to importune the prophet for permission to carry the manuscript home and show it to his friends. He urged the prophet to inquire of the Lord through the Urim and Thummim. The prophet, yielding to his friend, laid the matter before the Lord. I thought that was just an interesting piece there, that Joseph received revelation through the Urim and Thummim, which is news to me. I always thought that's how he would get the translation through the Urim and Thummim. I wasn't aware that he received the revelation through the Urim and Thummim after he prayed to the Lord. And I guess I just wonder if is that how the prophets work today, or was that something that was back then?
Yeah, I think the prophet receives direct revelation from God now. I seem to think, for some reason, it's in my mind, that Joseph is receiving revelation that way, and it's as he matures as a prophet that the revelations come quicker. I know that with him translating the Book of Mormon, how he translates the Book of Mormon evolves over time. And I wonder if that's linked to his maturity as a leader, or his maturity as having a link with Christ, perhaps, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, we know that as the years go on, he receives more and more physical visions, more than just the revelations coming to him. He sees a lot of visions. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's just as he gets better and more mature and a bit older, his revelations come differently. Yeah, I don't know. But I just thought it was an interesting fact.
Okay, so he asks him twice. The Lord says no on both occasions. And Martin's very unsatisfied. He's not happy at all with this answer. Not that he's kicking and screaming, but he needs to satisfy his wife as well. And and he wants to know. He's very curious. And he's an intellectual businessman as well. I don't think there's malice. There's a lot of malice behind it, but this is his personality at that time. So he inquired, and so the Lord eventually says, okay, do as you wish. You can take it to him. But there's a covenant, there's a bond that is struck between Joseph and Martin Harris. And that is that he can take the plates, but he can only show them to 5 people. He can show them to his wife, Lucy, who is a very interested party, his brother, his dad, his mum, and his wife's sister. These are the 5 people that are entrusted. So June 14th, you mentioned earlier, this is when Martin Harris heads off, and then Joseph spends time with his wife as their child dies. Their child doesn't get a name, I don't believe.
Yeah.
The gravestone says infant.
Alvin.
It is Alvin?
Baby Alvin was born and died soon after.
Joseph is with Emma for 2 weeks, and then Emma starts to recover. There's some commentary around that I think is from the book of Joseph's mum, Lucy, where she says that Emma is almost saying that she wishes she was dead. She's just lost her firstborn, and things are extremely challenging, some that I just couldn't even imagine. So Joseph's with her, and after a couple of weeks, Joseph starts feeling really worried about these 116 pages. Meanwhile, if we flash to the Harris household, there is a commotion. Commotion is probably the way to put it. And what's happening is there's a chest of drawers. Martin shows it to his wife and shows it to a couple of some other named people. And then he locks the manuscript is locked in a chest of drawers, and the key is taken by Lucy. At a point in time, the chest of drawers the lock is picked, and the manuscript is taken out, and the manuscript is then just shown willy-nilly to anyone who wants to see it. The manuscript ends up being taken. Perhaps it was thrown in a bin. The record isn't super clear, but it's possible that the manuscript was thrown in a bin, or the manuscript was taken maliciously, as in, let's take it, and once they redo this 116 pages, we'll tell them that it's not the same, and therefore it's not of God. So I don't know if that's concrete, Clive. There's a couple of sources that I guess I'm just trying to make a more heads or tails of, but certainly it was locked in a chest of drawers. That lock was picked, and then it was just shown to whoever it is that wanted to look at, therefore breaking the covenant that Martin and Joseph had between each other.
So, well, I mean, we assume we assume that it was destroyed, because if you remember, if those listening watched our interview with Keith Erickson, one thing I asked him off air was about the 116 pages, and if anyone has actually come forth and said, hey, I've got it. Because to me, it's a huge thing for no one to ever come forth. And he actually said, yeah, about once a year, someone will come forward and say, I've got it, or I know someone who's got it, but nothing's ever come about from it. And he said, we've got to investigate anyway, just to be on the safe side. But since nothing's ever come of it over all these years, we just assume that they were actually just destroyed. Because, there'd be whispers somewhere. No one could keep a secret that big. So, we just assumed that they were probably destroyed. Just some notes on the 116 pages to put it in perspective, that the fact, we don't have them anymore. The original manuscript is 488 pages or thereabouts. And so for the Book of Lehi, what we call it, the Book of Lehi, which would be 116 pages, that's another like 23% more to be added on. That's a huge amount. If you think the Book of Alma, which is the biggest book in the Book of Mormon, that was only 96 pages of the original manuscript. So the Book of Lehi was huge. In fact, josephsmithpapers.org says that the lost portion apparently contained a history of Lehi's family, his descendants, all the way down to the reign of King Benjamin. So it was a huge portion. And it would have been from a different perspective to the one we've got of Nephi, through the eyes of Lehi.
Down to King Benjamin. So the bit that we get skipped in the Book of Mormon, where it's Omni, Enos, Omni, Jarom, where it's just all those skipped generations, there was more detail. About that time.
Exactly. There was more detail. There was, the small plates, the big plates. There was a lot of plates for people to write on. And the ones that we got were, I guess, I don't have much to write, so I'm going to skip this bit, and I wonder what the Book of Lehi maybe had a bit more detail about what
And
happened
who
with all
filled it
this.
out? If it was it Lehi, was it Nephi as well?
I mean, it could have been filled out by Nephi, or it could have been passed on. No, it would have been passed on to the
More
same
from
people.
Jacob?
It would have been passed on through the
Yeah.
same people. Yeah, but
Yeah, if it's the same book, if it's the same gold plates, it's gone to Nephi and he's written one and one. Anyway, that's really interesting.
yes, yeah. Just there was a lot to it. So the Book of Mormon would have been massive had we have had it still.
Yeah. And we think it's big now.
Yeah, exactly. Lucy Harris, she wasn't done after, whatever happened to the 116 pages. She wanted to see the gold plates as well. She wanted to see the gold plates so badly that she ransacked Joseph Smith's house. She says that she ransacked every nook and cranny of the house, and when she couldn't find it, she suspected that he had buried it in the garden, and she went and dug it all up, trying to find it. So, I mean, this was one determined woman to say, originally started out as a really good helper to the Smiths, and then...
Yeah. So, Clive, while that's all happening at the Harris's household, Joseph fetches for Emma's mum, tags in with Emma's mum so Emma's mum can look after her, and Joseph heads back to Palmyra. And there's an incredible story that I wanted to tell you about if I haven't already. And that is this stagecoach. Joseph catches a stagecoach back to Palmyra, and he can't eat. He hasn't slept. He is stressed. He's 100% stressed. And in the stagecoach, there's one other unnamed person. It's just a man is the only description. And this man realizes that Joseph is stressed. Joseph hasn't eaten. They're hours and hours in this stagecoach, 21 hours or something, maybe more. And they get to a point where they're at Joseph's stop. And Joseph hasn't eaten or slept or anything the whole time. And they're at the stop. And Joseph's home is 20 miles away. And now Joseph has to walk the 20 miles. This unnamed man recognizes that Joseph is probably not going to make the 20 miles and just walks with him. Lucy, his mum, records that he walked with him all night to the point where Joseph was so weak that this unnamed man helped Joseph, held him by the arm, and helped guide him to the home that he needed to get to. When they got to the home, this unnamed person sat at the dinner table, accepted some breakfast, and then disappeared to never be heard of or seen again. And we have no idea who that is, but just some compassionate soldier, perhaps.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's all throw wild theories at it, but yeah.
Was it you?
Yeah. Yes. Amazing.
They get there and Joseph fetches for Martin, and Martin doesn't arrive for a while. He gets there at something like 8 a.m. And around 12:30 in the afternoon, Martin Harris arrives and he's looking sheepish. He goes and he's walking around in the front yard and he sits on the fence for a while. And eventually, after quite some time, he comes in and Joseph immediately asks him, "Have you broken your oath and have you lost the manuscript?" And Martin tells him that he has. And he's looked everywhere. Joseph demands that he should go back to the house and look again. Martin says to him, "It's no point in doing that. I've literally ripped open every pillow. I've ripped open every doona. This thing ain't there. It's totally gone." Joseph's freaking out. He says, what am I going to tell Emma? What about the rebuke I'm going to get from Angel Moroni? And he's berating Martin Harris, and Joseph's crying. This is all a record from his mum. He's pacing and he's not eating. And as you can imagine, he absolutely just feels sick in the pit of his stomach. So that's the story of how the 116 pages get lost. And there's a little bit more of colorfulness in that conversation, but nevertheless, it's in there. And this is where then rebuke, we go back to Doctrine and Covenants, section 3. This is where this rebuke comes from. Joseph gets this from the Lord upon Joseph realizing that the manuscript's gone, and Doctrine and Covenants, section 3 happens. So there's a lot in there, and you can see the frustration, but also there's a turn in the text, and the Lord is saying to Joseph that he can repent.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I was reading that Martin Harris, he only wrote a third of the Book of Lehi. So when Joseph said, what's Emma going to say? She must have written quite a lot of it. In fact, Emma says that she wrote a bit, and Reuben, her brother, scribed a bit as well. So that's quite interesting.
Some of the scriptures, Clive, here in verse 9, so we get, "Behold, thou art Joseph, and thou wast chosen to do the work of the Lord. But because of transgression, if thou art not aware, thou wilt fall." And then we have this turn of tone. "But remember, God is merciful. Therefore, repent of that which thou hast done, which is contrary to the commandment which I gave you. Repent that you didn't listen. I gave you a commandment to not give the manuscript, but you did. And thou art still chosen, and art again called to the work." So, like a really powerful, but the rebuke isn't that you're just an absolute feral, and this is a rebuke for the first eight verses, but then the rest, the other 11 verses, is not that. And I think I guess it's a lesson about repentance and a lesson about the mercifulness of God, knowing that this inspired text is gone, but God is still merciful to a repentant soul.
On to section 4, Daniel. So section 4, it's almost like a break in between. So Joseph receives revelation for his father, and which is basically the whole section is on missionary work. And here's a fact for you. I'm not sure if you know it or not, but all missionaries have to memorize Doctrine and Covenants section 4.
Really?
And we quote it in our...
Even still now?
Well, I haven't been a missionary for a long time, but before me, forever before me, they have. Yeah, we quote it in our district meetings, our zone meetings, our mission conferences, and yeah, I still know it to this day.
I will ask our missionaries on Sunday if they know this.
Excellent. And if they do, make sure you...
If they don't, I'm going to tell them to get out the building.
That's right. How dare they not? So, but yeah, it's interesting because it's very much based on missionary work. That a marvelous work is about to come forth, and it talks about the field is white, all ready to harvest. So this revelation comes in between Joseph Smith having the Urim and Thummim taken from him and then given back to him, right?
Lucy, his mum, reports that as a context. So Joseph was going to the Il Camorra in September of every year. Lucy, his mum, reports that in September of the same year is when he was told he will get if he's faithful, he will get the gift back.
So he goes to the hill every year, even after he receives the plates?
No, but there's something with that date that he has to go on that date. That date is significant somewhere. Someone cleverer than us will know.
So September 22nd?
22nd. And then so Lucy, his mum, reports that he's told that he could get his gift back on the 22nd of September of that year.
Right, okay. All right.
So he's without the gift for July, August, September. He's without the gift for about 3 months.
Okay. So then, so that's the revelation he gets for his father. And then we are back into the Lord, not rebuking him, but sort of explaining to him what the next steps are going to be because of this thing that has happened, right? So he's now talking about how we need witnesses to corroborate Joseph's story, I suppose, in a way, right?
I guess my question to you is back on section 4. Why is that in there? Why Joseph is now far from the young man, money digger. He's far from that now. And in between this whole Martin Harris issue, this whole 116 pages issue, this section 4 is dropped in there. There's got to be a reason. Is there something about Joseph Smith Sr. that we don't know, that he needed to hear this revelation of missionary work to, maybe he had some he wasn't overly comfortable sharing, or maybe he felt bad for his son because his son was getting abused, and so he didn't want to share it so much to bring more rebuke on his son. I guess I can hypothesize till the cows come home, but I wonder if there's something like that is part of this revelation.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, we didn't memorize the story. That would have been handy. But yeah, you're right. There's obviously something important to it. Joseph's father ended up being a patriarch, didn't he? And he was sort of the first one after Joseph received these visions to then believe Joseph and follow Joseph. And now he's received one of the first revelations to somebody else in the Doctrine and Covenants. So it's interesting.
The only thing that it could line up with is obviously the church would be established in the following year. So he's being told that a marvelous work is coming forward. So maybe it's for Joseph Smith Sr. He needs to prepare the family.
Maybe, yeah.
That this is happening. The other thing is that this coincides with Oliver Cowdery as well. Oliver Cowdery arriving on the scene. So maybe there's something there about Oliver Cowdery, him being more forthcoming with sharing the gospel with Oliver Cowdery. But yeah, there must be something in there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Cool. Just on Joseph Smith getting the Urim and Thummim back. Is that what we're up to? Because it doesn't...
Sorry, that was Robot Town.
Are we talking about Joseph Smith getting the Urim and Thummim back? I've just got a fact about it.
Why don't you say it and then just insert?
Just on Joseph Smith.
We talk about just
on Joseph Smith getting the Urim and Thummim back. David Whitmer actually said that the Urim and Thummim he received the second time isn't the same as the first one. He said the one that he got back was more kidney shaped and worked in conjunction with the seer stone. So it wasn't the same. You know, the first one had a huge breastplate and looked like spectacles, but this one, it was more convenient. But then there was nothing more written about it. So that was interesting.
Urim and Thummim 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like, all right, well, that's the one that was passed down. This is the one you're going to use from now on.
Oh, that's really interesting. And never any talk besides the Comoros Cave stories. No talk at all about the Sword of Laban.
No. In fact, I think wasn't it Brigham Young that first brought up about the Comoros Cave? I'm pretty sure it was Brigham Young that the first one that spoke about it. I can't find anything about Joseph Smith. So yeah, Sword of Laban not mentioned again, and interesting. I mean, imagine all the other things that we don't know that Joseph Smith, either felt sacred, or just wasn't in the, just didn't write it down.
And are they in diaries somewhere? So much of what we have is from the contemporaries of Joseph. For example, the way that the Book of Mormon was translated, Joseph never once told us how he translated the book. The stories that we get is from other people who were there. The scribes tell us how they understood that it was happening next to them. They would say that there was a sheet in between and Joseph was translated on one side of the sheet and they were on the other, or whatever it was. But we never hear that from Joseph. And I wonder if Joseph told other people other things and they wrote them in their diaries.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And we don't have them, or someone has them.
And Emma, she said that she felt it through the cloth and you felt the pages turn as if you would thumb through pages. And yeah, everyone was quite descriptive than Joseph was. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so Clive, Section 5 is a continuation of Section 3, and then there's an addition to it. So we know that the majority of Section 5 we receive in March of 1828, but we believe a portion of Section 5 is actually comes with Section 3. But Section 5 talks about the witnesses, and I think this is a moment of where Joseph must have been cheering. I'll just go to Section 5, verse 11. And in addition to your testimony, the testimony of 3 of my servants whom I shall call and ordain, unto whom I shall show these things, and they shall go forth with my words that are given through you. So Joseph is told that there's going to be 3 more witnesses. And I can imagine just how wrapped he is with this idea that he's not shouldering the entire idea that they're gold plates. He's allowed to show other people, and other people are going to be able to help him and back him up on this story that he's trying to tell people.
I wonder if you'd assume, I think it's safe to assume this, that the Lord always planned on having the 3 witnesses. But I wonder if, this was sort of the time, because, we've spoken about it before. There's so much that Joseph needs to learn, but everything needs to come in its own time. And because this has happened, the Lord's gone, all right, now's the time for this part. Now's the time. Because, you said, what did Joseph Smith say? If he didn't see it himself, he wouldn't have believed it. So now's the time to go, okay, well, let's get the 3 witnesses in there. And it's of the testimony of Joseph and 3 others out of the method 2 or 3 witnesses, So I wonder if that was sort of like sped the process up because of what had happened.
And maybe the Lord had some compassion on Joseph, that maybe there was a part of Joseph that wanted to give the plates, or wanted to show the plates to Martin, or wanted to give the 116 pages to Martin so that other people could believe him, and he just wasn't constantly fighting this fight that he was living ever since that time in the woods. He's just doing all of this by himself. And the Lord maybe here is compassionate. Says, yep, I'm going to let other people, and you're right. Now's the time. Now's a good time. And let's get other people on board as well so that you can have some other people with you.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because the Lord doesn't actually call the 3 witnesses at this time. He's just letting Joseph know. We're saying 11, in addition to your testimony, the testimony of 3 of my servants, whom I shall call and ordain, unto whom I will show these things, that they shall go forth with my words that are given through you. So essentially, yeah, he's saying, well, in addition to you, there's others, and I'm going to prepare them, and I'm going to ordain them. So he's not doing it right now. In fact, I don't think he calls them for another few sections. But he's saying to Joseph, you're not alone. It's been a struggle, and I've got a plan for you to be able to share this burden with a lot of other people. And then eventually we know that it was 8 more on top of that was called eventually again.
Yeah, So there's others. So there's the 3 witnesses. They get to see and they hear God's voice. That the Book of Mormon is true. And then, there's the 8 witnesses that just get to handle the plates. So, Clive, I guess the Lord really wraps it up here with Martin as well. If we go over the page to verse 26, and I, the Lord, command him, my servant, Martin Harris, that he shall say no more unto them concerning these things, except he shall say, I have seen them, and they have been shown unto me by the power of God, and these are the words which he shall say. But if he will deny this, he will break the covenant which he has before covenanted with me, and behold, he has been condemned. So the Lord is speaking directly to Martin here, but I like the idea that the Lord is giving Joseph a help. He's given him a help, and he's curving off this idea that don't worry about the 116 pages now. They are done. It's okay. There's obviously been a repentance process. Joseph's got the translation back. He's had a revelation for his father. You need to move on with the work, and I'm going to get someone to help you in your corner.
Just one thing going back there, I don't want to take away anything from that, but just going back to verse 14 of section 5, I was reading this and I thought, I've heard this before. I'll read it to you. See if you can figure out where we've heard it before. And to none else will I grant this power to receive this same testimony among this generation. In this, the beginning of the rising up and the coming forth of the church out of the wilderness. This part. Clear as the moon, as fair as the sun, and as terrible as an army with banners. I read that, and I read it, and I thought, I've heard this somewhere before. And then I cheated, and I used the footnotes, and it's actually from Songs of Solomon. The Lord is quoting Songs of Solomon. And in Songs of Solomon, right, it says this in chapter 6, verse 10. Who is she that looketh forth in the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and as terrible as an army with banners? And to understand this, the story with the Songs of Solomon is there's a lady named Shulamite, right? Who the Songs of Solomon is mostly about Shulamite, and it's describing, she has indescribable beauty, but she's inaccessible to flattery. So you just basically, you can't flatter her. And she's also, and this is the whole Songs of Solomon, she's unconquerable for Solomon. No matter what he says, he can't get her, basically. And that's sort of how the Lord describes his church. It's this indescribable beauty that's going to come forth. He says the church out of the wilderness, this indescribable beauty, but it's not accessible to flattery. That's not what we're about. And it can't be conquered, and it never will be. And I just thought it was a really poetic, interesting way that the Lord described the church, the same sort of way that Songs of Solomon was described.
Let's wrap it up there. Fantastic ending. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. I hope you're enjoying the Doctrine and Covenants studying with us this year. Catch us on. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And we will see you next week for the next episode.